What do you get when you turbocharge the Thrustmaster T300? You get the Thrustmaster TS PC Racer. Cut! Come on! This is so corny. Who wrote this? Sim racing chassis in this video is the Next Level Racing GT Ultimate featuring the new motion platform V3. Learn more at nextlevelracing.com. Welcome to our review of the Thrustmaster TS PC Racer, the new flagship wheel for the PC only. And Darren did a first, not a review, look of the wheel back a few weeks ago, and quite frankly hit on a lot of topics that I'm going to talk about today. So think of this as a second opinion. And also we'll sprinkle in a few other topics that weren't covered there, but you guys had questions for in the comment section. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at some numbers and fancy acronyms used with the TS PC Racer. The Thrustmaster TS PC Racer has many new features, including a new 40-watt brushless motor, a new cooling system called Motor Cooling Embedded, or MCE, that will prevent the motor from losing power due to high temperatures. This new cooling allows for the motor to have 50% more dynamic response and 4 times greater stall force, the force when you're holding the wheel steady, like in a long corner, than any previous Thrustmaster wheels. The wheel comes in at 16 bits of resolution, thanks in part to the new Field Oriented Control, or FOC, that increased the precision of the wheel. And yes, it has a quote-unquote turbo power supply that is said to provide continuous power even at the peak power of 400 watts thanks to its more efficient, finless, toroidal shape design. Or however you say that. I mean, essentially it's shaped like a tire or donut. So now that we know the thoughts of the Thrustmaster PR team, let's get to our own thoughts. Aesthetically, I think there are more pros here than cons. I'm kind of torn on the shape of the wheel base. From some angles it looks good, and from others it looks like a bloated brick. But I do really like the design decisions made with the cooling slots and exposed bolt heads. Kind of a throwback race car look when body panels were bolted on and had louvers. Materials-wise, the TS PC base looks much more like a $500 or €550 wheel in person than in pictures. The base features quality plastics and a metal top, base, and back. Thanks to these materials, the base feels very solid and heavy. Speaking of the metal bits, the bottom features 2 holes for M6 bolts, so the wheel can be hard mounted to your rig or desk, the ideal way to mount a wheel like this, and an integrated threaded post for the table clamp. The table clamp is the same as previous Thrustmaster models and it gets the job done, but the interesting thing now is that the threaded post now has a rubber gasket around it, assumed to better hold the clamp in place, and 2 more posts that appear to prevent the clamp from moving side to side. The backside of the base features a fan and the I/O with power, USB, pedal, and shifter connections. Like the base, the rim has more pros than cons. I really like the shape and the 28cm diameter, which feels right for a Formula style rim. The metal faceplate gives the wheel a very solid feel with 0 flex, and the meaty hand grips really allow you to get your whole hand in on the action of turning the wheel, not just your fingers. With that said, I think the Thrustmaster 599 Alcantara rim has ruined me. The hard rubber wrapped in suede grips on the TS PC aren't nearly as nice as the actual Ferrari source Alcantara and underpadding used on the 599 rim. It's not bad, but it would have been nice to see higher quality materials used on the flagship wheel. On the backside of the rim are the 2 paddle shifters that feel very familiar to past Thrustmaster paddles, besides being smaller and feeling a little tighter in terms of their snapback, which is nice. Back to the front of the rim and let's talk buttons. The rim features 6 action buttons, a D-pad, and a 3-way toggle with push function. The new glossy buttons feel nice and have a similar clicking action to previous Thrustmaster buttons, which is just fine. They are also labeled with their button number, which will be extremely helpful when mapping them, removing the guessing game of mapping buttons on the PC. The button colors used on the rim have been controversial since the first images of the TS PC Racer were released. Reaction has been very love it or hate it. In person, I feel pretty indifferent. Yes, they are pretty loud and remind me of Post-it notes, and yes, more subdued colors would have probably looked better, but the use of very different colors have helped me when it comes to mapping buttons, so in terms of function, it's mission accomplished. The biggest oddity of the TSPC rim has to be the bolted-on face plate. Not sure if it's as simple as Thrustmaster wanted to carry the base's bolt head design to the rim, but with a cutout in the wheel plate and plenty of space, it makes you wonder if Thrustmaster is planning some sort of add-on rev light attachment or screen. At the very least, the cutout creates a golden opportunity for the sim racing aftermarket to offer a rev light of their own, or some kind of cell phone cradle. I mean, for myself personally, I've never wished I had a 3D printer more, because if I had one, I would definitely have a cradle already designed up for my cell phone. Naturally, like all other wheelbases in the Thrustmaster ecosystem, other Thrustmaster rims can be attached via the semi-quick release system that now features a very large screw to ensure that the rim doesn't move whatsoever. Whatever rim you do place on the wheel base, it will be able to rotate between 270 and 1080 degrees, and the degrees can be adjusted on the fly via scrolling left or right on the D-pad while pressing the mode button. Before we get to driving performance, I want to talk about one more aesthetic aspect, and that's the turbocharged power supply. Now, I know this can be a little gimmicky, and I was kind of split on it myself when I saw the announcement, but since getting the wheel and having it in my hands, I actually think it's kind of neat. It's not nearly as plasticky looking as it looks in pictures, and I kind of like the look of it, and what I like about it is it has holes in it, whether it's on the outside perimeter or the very center hole, that would make it really easy to mount on your rig, and I'm going to be looking to do that in the future, figure out some way to mount it to my rig and kind of display it off, because, like I said, I think it's kind of fun. So with that said, let's get to how the TSPC Racer drives, and even though that intro bit about the turbocharger attached to T300 was kind of a joke, it kinda isn't. The TSPC Racer really does act like a T300 or TX that's been turbocharged. The force feedback is a fair amount stronger. If I had to put a number on it, I would say that the TSPC is about 50% stronger than the T300 or TX, which is a nice step up. There's a weight in the wheel that isn't present in the T300 or TX as you turn the wheel into, through, and out of the corner. The weight, or probably a better way to put it, the feedback, also becomes very noticeable when the back end jumps out and you need to catch the car. Having some weight that you have to steer through actually makes catching the car a little easier and even a little more enjoyable. In terms of force feedback strength, I first adjusted the in-game settings to get as much force feedback from the game without clipping as I could. Then I went to the Thrustmaster control panel and adjusted overall strength from 75 to 100%. On past Thrustmaster wheels, I have left this at 75% because it felt best, but with the TSPC, I didn't notice any negative effects of turning the strength up to 100, so I would suggest tuning your wheel, if you do pick one up, somewhere between those two numbers. The TSPC is also smoother than the T300/TX. The difference isn't as great as the force feedback, but I would put it at about 25% smoother, which is still a good amount. So we compare the TSPC to current wheels to give you guys a reference point. If you try these other wheels, then you might understand, where we're at when we're describing these force feedback, smoothness, all that kind of good stuff. But there is one other reference point that you guys wanted us to compare it to, and that is the Thrustmaster T500, so we're going to do that. The TSPC is a little bit stronger than the T500 force feedback wise. It's not a great difference, but it is a little bit stronger. But the big difference is in smoothness, where the TSPC Racer is way smoother than the T500. Also, even if I turn the force feedback way up, like a lot of clipping up, I couldn't sense any slipping from the assumed belt drive. We say assumed belt drive because Thrustmaster hasn't said anything either way, but it feels belt driven. In fact, this is one of the biggest takeaways when driving the TSPC Racer. If you were to blindfold me or take the branding off the wheel or put an Oculus Rift on my head and sit me down at a wheel and I drove this wheel, I would be able to quickly tell you that this is a Thrustmaster product. Now, this can be taken one or two ways. It could be at first taken as a good thing. If you like to feel Thrustmaster wheels like I do, then this is an evolution of that feeling, just an improvement, and it's a good thing. If you're looking for something a little more revolutionary, well, this is probably not something you want to hear. And speaking of hearing, the Thrustmaster TSPC Racer overall is a pretty quiet wheel. I never heard it while I was racing. The only time I ever heard the wheel was when I was done racing, and the fan would run for about 5 minutes after I was done. And the fan isn't necessarily loud, but it does have a little bit of a pitch that can be not irritating, but it's noticeable. It's noticeable that the fan's going, especially if you're in a quiet room, but after 5 minutes it turns off and that's not a problem. So it's not a silent fan, but it's not terrible, and cooling is a good thing. So with that said, let's go ahead and get to our final thoughts on the Thrustmaster TSPC Racer for the PC only. So recently we released our 2017 edition of the Racing Wheel Buyer's Guide. First one up was for the PlayStation 4, and in that Buyer's Guide, we defined wheels in a new way, putting them into 4 different categories, with the categories being entry, consumer, enthusiast, and hardcore. And for our definition of the enthusiast level category, we said it's a wheel that has greater performance than the consumer category, but it comes at a price, and with the TSPC Racer being about $500 or 550 euros, it falls into that enthusiast level category, and I think it also falls into that definition. So with that said, the question becomes, is the price of the TSPC Racer at $500 or 550 euros worth the performance you get and the extra costs you have over a consumer level wheel? And I think the answer is yes. Now, for $500, I would have liked to seen some nicer hand grips on the rim, but besides that, there really isn't anything to complain about. The wheelbase is made out of nice materials, it's super solid, has a better force feedback, it's smoother. Besides the hand grips, the rest of the rim is pretty nice. Again, very solid, the right size, nice thick hand grips, I do like that. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Plus, I don't know if it's really that much more price-wise. So for $500 you get a wheel, and then you need pedals. And between $100 and $200 you have a few pretty nice selections. You can go with the Thrustmaster T3PAs, the Thrustmaster T3PA Pros, or you can go to the Fanatics CSL Elites, which I'm using and I think quite a lot of. So let's say you go with the Fanatics, and that puts you at $700. At $700, that's $300 more than, say, the T300 GT edition. And even though $300 more isn't cheap, I do think you're getting $300 more worth of performance there. Or if you look at like the Alcantara edition of T300, this is only $230 more. And while that 599 rim is sweet, I still think with the wheelbase and pedals and things like that, you're still getting the performance for your money. So, this isn't too bad of a deal. Now, does the TSPC Racer blow my socks off? Is this the best thing since crack cocaine? Or insert whatever you like to do on your free time? No, it isn't. But to be fair, I'm fairly jaded when it comes to reviewing sim racing hardware at this point, and it takes a lot to get me super excited. But I will say, I went and I jumped around a bunch of different cars in iRacing specifically to get footage for this review, and I was going to go out and just get a lap because I only need a handful of seconds at a time when I go and put these reviews together. But I'd go out there and I would run a lap, and then I would run another lap, and then another. And then 20, 30 minutes later, I was kind of like, well, I guess I should stop because I'm running out of storage on my SD card. And I think that is the Best thing I can say about a product that we review. Products that even when I don't necessarily need to go and drive it, I just keep on driving. So that will do it for our review of the Thrustmaster TS-PC Racer. As always, thank you for watching. Now, I know during the first look, Darren promised that we'll be doing some kind of comparison of the TS-PC to the Fanatec CSW V2, and that video will be coming some point in the future. Also, we'll probably put the CSL Elite wheel in there as well, because once you go and put a rim on the CSL Elite wheelbase, you're pretty much into this price category, so might as well go and compare and contrast that so you guys can make better purchasing decisions, and you guys can write mean comments in the comment section, because those comparison videos are always so much fun. Not really. But speaking of thumbs up, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We have always plenty of hardware reviews in the past and coming up in the future, so interested in that, please subscribe to the channel. Also check our website, isrtv.com, that contains said reviews, and the website's a lot easier to navigate than YouTube and figure out different reviews if you're looking for that. Also, check out the Amazon affiliate links in the description below. Click on the link, shop through Amazon, buy something sim racing or not sim racing related, and we get a little kickback and it doesn't cost you a thing. So as always, thanks for watching Inside Sim Racing. See you guys next time.